Good morning and happy Wednesday. I am glad to see all of you. It gets kind of lonely out here at school on Wednesday when there's no students. So always glad to see some smiling faces. Has anybody got anything going on we need to talk about? Anything I can help you with? It's all good. Everybody's been working on assignments, I hear. So that's good. Thank you for getting those things in. We've got about 10 days until our 9 weeks is up. And so please, if you have any outstanding assignments, please be working on those and get those in as soon as possible. Okay, and you guys remember that on your off days, on the 2 days per week that you don't come to school here at Tech, you know that you can ride the bus out if you'd like to and work over in the lab with Mrs. Ferranti if you just need a quiet place to work or access to a computer or something like that. We do have that available, so I would encourage you to take advantage of it if you need that quiet place or just need a little bit of help. Okay, questions, comments, concerns, anybody? Okay, well, I guess we'll get to our lesson then. Let's see here. I'm going to share my screen. Let's see, right here. All right, so we've been talking about lots of fun things. We've been talked about herbs and spices, and I was so pleased. Everybody just did such a wonderful job on their projects. I think I was thinking back on the last several years, and man, I think you guys were probably some of the best I can remember in recent history. So I'm so proud of the work you guys put into that and the effort that you made. And so I think we'll continue onward. I hope you guys had fun the other day when we did all of the Flavor University and all the smelling of the different kinds of and tasting all the different kinds of things. I've got another one that is kind of similar that is different kinds of salt. Do you think, would that be interesting to somebody? I think it would too. And so in the next couple of class times, I don't know if we'll get to it the next go around, but very soon I will try to make it a point for us to be able to try the different flavors of salt, because it's very interesting. And salt is not just plain old salt. There's lots of different flavors, and they're fun to explore. But something that we need to talk about is measurements. And we talked about kind of the difference in baking and cooking. You guys kind of remember that discussion where baking, remember, is a chemical reaction, whereas cooking can be a little bit of this and a little bit of that till it tastes good. But the thing about baking is accurate measurement will definitely affect the outcome of your product. And so learning that skill, it takes a little practice and knowing which utensils to use and that kind of thing. And so we're going to talk about that today. And I'll show you the different types of utensils and different ways that professional cooks use to make sure that their recipes turn out the same way every time, and how we can measure for accuracy. All right, so here's some measuring methods, and there's two basic methods. We have the liquid and the dry. So the one on the left is the liquid, and if you'll notice when you look at it, it is clear, so you can see through it, right? And it has the markings on the side, and it has this spout. You see that? And that's for pouring out liquids. Whereas this one over here is straight-sided. And so you would fill that all the way to the top and then level it off with a straight edge. And that would be a way that you would measure dry ingredients, okay? And I know that sometimes we use things like this for wet and vice versa. And you can, but again, remember that that baking is a chemical reaction. So on things that matter, we're going to want to be really accurate. And so we want to use the proper utensil for the job. Okay. Okay, so here's just a little bit of history. So in the United States, we use something called customary units. And so those are things like teaspoons, ounces, pint, pound, cup, gallon, that kind of thing. And so, and most of us are familiar with recipes that are written using that format. Okay, the rest of the world, except for maybe one other country, uses the metric system. So did you guys learn about metric system, probably, or metric, probably in your math class or maybe science? Does that sound familiar to any of you guys?
It was too long ago.
It's been a while ago, Cindy. Yeah, me too. Hey, Sus, are you familiar with the metric system? Hey, Sus, are you familiar with the metric system? I can't hear you. All right. Well, anyway, we'll move on. So, the metric system, whenever you think about it, though, it would be pretty easy to use once you kind of got the hang of it, because everything is multiples of 10, basically. And so it would be easy for addition and subtraction because you're just using tens. And so if you look at cookbooks that are printed, anywhere in European type cookbooks, you will see that it will be in metric. Sometimes you'll see also cookbooks that have both. They'll have the imperial and they'll also have metric, and you'll see that. So if you work for a company, like a big company such as a cruise line, guess what? You're going to be using recipes that are based in metric because they are European, often European companies. And so the standardized recipes, which we'll talk about here in a bit, are all based on metric measurements. Okay. All right, so here's something that we're going to also start talking about. Is something called an equivalent, and what that means is you could use a measure to receive or to measure out the same type of the same kind of measure, same amount of something. For example, 4 tablespoons could also be written as a fourth of a cup, because if you did 1, 2, 3, 4 tablespoons and put that in a fourth cup measure, it would be all the way to the top. And so, and it would be a little handier to use a 1/4 cup measure as opposed to measuring out 4 tablespoons, wouldn't it? Yeah. So whenever we talk about converting recipes or increasing or decreasing recipes, that information is going to be really valuable to us, because we'll have, sometimes we'll get like 6/4 of a cup, and well, that doesn't make any sense, does it? And so we'll be figuring out how to make that be a logical equivalent. Does that make sense to everybody? Okay. So in things like, for instance, 1 liquid cup is equivalent of 8 fluid ounces. Okay, so again, those are equivalents. So they are ways that we can express an amount in different ways. We'll be talking more about that a little bit in the future. Okay, so one of the ways that we can measure things is by volume, and that is the amount an ingredient takes up, the amount of space that an ingredient takes up. Okay, and volume is much different than weight. Okay, and so whenever you are talking about costing a recipe, for instance, if most things are purchased when you think about by weight, and it's a much different thing whenever you're thinking about, let's say, popcorn, for instance. If you measured popcorn in a measuring cup, it would take up a large amount of volume, but it wouldn't weigh very much. It might take up 8 ounces in a measuring cup, but it wouldn't weigh 8 ounces. Does that make sense? Okay. And so it matters a great deal whenever you're talking about recipes, whether it's a volume measurement or a weight measurement. Okay, so we'll finish talking about that. So weight is an expression of heaviness. The way that we buy things such as meat. When you go to the grocery store, you buy a pound of meat or 2 pounds or whatever, and you buy things like butter, for instance, you buy a pound of butter. So that would be an example of how we use weight. Some other things you might see in a recipe would be count. Like usually you'll see eggs like that, like 2 eggs, or if you're making banana bread, it might say two bananas mashed or something like that. So that would be an example of count in a recipe. Okay, but whatever it says on there, being able to measure accurately is going to affect the outcome of your product. And whenever we think about places like bakeries, for instance, bakeries, may be famous for a particular thing that they serve. And so every time you go there, you want it to be the same every time because it's the delicious thing and the whole point that you went to that place. And if it's different, the next time you're going to wonder why. And so the way that we are able to control the outcome is that we measure carefully. We have a standardized recipe so that even someone that is new to our company or new to baking can easily read it and understand. And so we still get that same consistent product every time. Okay. And so that's why measurement it's really important that we understand that so that we can have what we call quality control. So it's the same every time when we talk about a commercial product. Okay. So dry ingredients, things like flour, things like sugar, those are all things that we will put in the dry measuring cup. And remember, that's the one you can't see through, the one with the little handle. And then we will level it off with something flat, usually like a frosting spatula or a knife or something like that. Okay. One of the things that we like to encourage people to do is pour the ingredient into the measuring cup as opposed to scoop it into the measuring cup. Because if you think about it, things like flour, for example, they will it packs, and you will get a heavier hand and a heavier product scooping as you would pouring. And so again, we just like to encourage pouring into the measuring cup as opposed to scooping. And if you're worried about overspill, a lot of times I'll put down a piece of parchment paper and then get my measuring cup on top of that parchment. So if I happen to dump out more than I need, I can just pick up the paper and then just pour it back into the container. One of the few things that we do pack into a measuring cup would be brown sugar. Okay, and we press that in, and we don't have to hulk out on it, so to speak, but just want to finger press it into the measuring cup, and we can get a nice, accurate measurement that way. Okay, so dry measuring sets. When we go to the grocery store or maybe even Walmart, you need to buy some measuring cups. You'll usually find this combination of 4th cup, 3rd cup, 1/2 cup, and 1 cup. Okay, and that's pretty typical. Every once in a while, you'll see a set that has like a 3/4 cup, but more often it's just the combination of these 4. In a metric set, you can see down here below, it's pretty much the same size, but they are different denominations. Okay, so something to consider is if you are measuring an ingredient, don't measure it out over your bowl of whatever it is that you're cooking, because if it all falls out or you fill it too fast, it can splash over into your bowl, and then you could possibly have ruined whatever it is that you were making. So just remember to kind of do that measuring off to the side or pre-measure everything so that you have it ready to go in as you need it. All right, anybody ever seen a recipe that says a dash or a pinch? Pretty common. So sometimes you'll see things like cayenne pepper. You guys know what cayenne pepper is? It's pretty hot and spicy, and oftentimes you'll see some that'll say a dash of cayenne pepper, and that just kind of gives it a little pep. But it means that we don't want to put too much in there, or too much will be too much, right? So and sometimes you'll see a lot of even sweets, for example. You might see a pinch of salt in there because salt does a couple of things. It will kind of counteract bitterness but it will also kind of balance out some flavor. So it kind of gives your tongue a little bit of a way to know that this is sweet. So it's just kind of a nice thing to add to our baked goods. Okay, so like we said earlier, liquid measuring cups are generally speaking see-through and have measurements and marking on the side. Now there are some measuring pitchers that are metal, but those are usually gallon, half gallon, and we know the measurement and we're using them for like a specific recipe. Okay, and again, they're marked in fractions of a cup. They're marked in fluid ounces on one side, and then a lot of them will have actually the metric measurement on the other side. Okay, and they have that spout that's designed for pouring liquid so it doesn't run back down and end up on the table as opposed to in your bowl. So it's meant to be convenient for ease of use. Okay, so here's the types of liquid measurements you might see, and really commonly you'll see a 1 and a 2 cup, but they come in all sizes. There's 4 cups. There's all sizes. But that Pyrex is a pretty common one that you'll see out in the world, and they tend to hold up pretty good. They hold up to heat, so you can microwave in them, and of course they can go through the dish machine, and they're pretty tough. Okay. So on measuring liquid, the best way to do that is to place your measuring cup on a level surface, and you pour the liquid into the cup. And the way that you check for accuracy is to bend down eye level with where the water is. And there's something, have you guys ever heard of the word meniscus? We have one in your knee, and if you tear it, then that's bad. But there's also a meniscus that is on water. And if you really look at liquid, on the outside edge of where it comes in contact with the container will be this tiny little bit of cling where it clings up the side of the vessel. Okay, and if you look at it, it'll look like there's a line, and the bottom of that line is what you want to have on the bottom of that meniscus, is what you want to have on the line of what you're measuring. Really measuring accurately, that's what you will do. But it's hard to get an accurate bit if you're holding it and trying to pour into it, because you'll hold it crooked, or if your countertop's crooked or something. But get down on that eye level with it, and just make sure that you have got it at the proper height. So that's how we measure liquid accurately. Okay. And on measuring spoons, the measuring spoons are either dry or liquid, but you'll fill them all the way to the top with whatever it is that you're measuring. Okay, so measuring fat is interesting. Okay, usually whenever you buy like butter or margarine at the store, if you look at the paper wrapping that the sticks are in, it's marked, isn't it? And like 1 stick is a half a cup, right? And then like half of a stick will be a 1/4 of a cup. So, but don't get confused, because sometimes you'll see a recipe, in particular, like I told you, I like the Barefoot Contessa. Well, her recipes will say 1/4 pound stick. So instead of a 1/4 of a stick, a 1/4 of a pound is 1 stick of butter. So you have to be careful that, read what that says, or you're going to have your measurement off. So, but sometimes you'll see a recipe that says stick of butter. Well, sometimes we get butter in that the whole pound or all 4 sticks is actually one chunk of butter. And so I've had students before think, oh, 1 stick, and so they throw the whole thing in. And so they've got 3 times too much butter in the recipe, and it's no wonder their cookies didn't turn out. So that happens. So be sure that whatever it is that your recipe calls for, that's what you're putting in there. So again, the stick method, if it says a 1/4 pound, that's 1 stick, or if it says a half a cup, that is also 1 stick. So with that stick method, usually that paper that it's wrapped in will be marked with measurements. The other thing you can do with things like, for instance, solid Crisco, will be that you will put it in a measuring cup, and you will want to use one of the dry measures, and you press it down using your rubber scraper. You want to make sure you get all of the air pockets out of that, so that you get an accurate measurement. Because if you have a big old air pocket in there, then you will have been, a couple of tablespoons short, perhaps, of whatever the recipe called for, which could affect your end product. The most accurate way to measure fat is with the water displacement. Okay, and so what we do with that is, let's say we wanted to measure a fourth of a cup of Crisco. What we would do is measure out 3/4 of a cup of water and then put Crisco in the water until our measurement read 1 cup. And then we would know that we had a fourth of a cup of Crisco. Does that make sense? To make sure it's completely submerged. But that would be the very much accurate way to measure that. I don't think anybody does that, but just FYI, that would be a way you could do it. Okay, and then here's weight. So here's our popcorn illustration here. So if you have a cup of popcorn or a cup of water, which one of those do you think weighs more, Jalissa? I didn't hear what you said, sweetheart.
Can you repeat what?
Which one do you think weighs more, popcorn or water?
Is this like a trick question?
No, it's just an easy question.
Water.
Yes, you're exactly right. So water weighs more, but it's to illustrate a point with a measuring cup. If you popcorn is going to have lots of little edges where nothing is, right? Lots of air spaces. Okay, and popcorn's fairly light anyway. So yeah, right on. So it's the same volume though in the 1 cup measure, but a much different weight. Okay. So weight, we measure that in ounces and in pounds, and volume we measure in fluid ounces. Okay. So here's some different ways that we might measure things by weight. This is like an old-timey baker's scale, which is just like a seesaw or an old-timey teeter-totter where you balance something on each end of it. This right here, these are different kinds of weights that you'll put on one side, and these are known amounts like 1 pound, half pound, however much you want to weigh out. You put that on one side, and then you will have a container over here, and you will fill it up until they're level, and that's how you know that you have your desired amount measured out. And so that's, like I said, the old-timey baker scale. This is like a spring scale right here. And this is like if you happen to go out front, like in the concession, whenever we have the concession open, we weigh our French fries on a spring scale. And it just has you can put your little French fry container on there and then put 4 ounces of French fries in it, and it tells you right away what it is, and off you go. So it's just a real simple operation here. And then this one here, the digital scale. And if you think about really fast, that would be definitely really fast and also very accurate. And so you'll see lots of electronic scales. And sometimes you'll see, we have done a couple things now on the meat slicer. And sometimes you'll see in delis, you'll see kind of a combo thing where you'll have the meat slicer and then the scale will be right there. And so you can immediately know how much cheese or meat you're slicing off. So your customer wants to buy a 1/4 pound or half pound, then it's just right there. And then it will go so far as to print out the label. And even if they're connected to your point of sale, they will take that particular amount out of your inventory. So some of them are extremely sophisticated, and then some of them are just the scale. So there's lots of different kinds of weight measuring devices, but these are probably the most common that we'll see. Okay, so whenever we measure stuff on our digital scale, remember we talked about the word tare, T-E-A-R, tare, and what that refers to as is that we're probably not going to eat the bowl that we put on the scale that we're measuring things in, but we needed a container to keep it from rolling all over the place. And so once we put our container on the scale, we want to push the word tare so that it zeroes out the bowl or the weight of whatever container we're using. and then we're only weighing the product as opposed to the product in the container. So that kind of matters. Okay. All right. So accurate measuring, again, one more time, is going to be the way that we get consistent baking, good consistent baking results. Okay. It's one of the most important things is proper measurement. Okay. Here's our measuring spoons, and those are for wet and dry. And a pretty typical set would be a fourth a teaspoon, half a teaspoon, 1 teaspoon, and then 1 tablespoon. And here's an equivalent. 1 tablespoon is how many teaspoons? Anybody? Anybody know? Miley, do you know? She does not know. Okay, so 3 teaspoons equals 1 tablespoon. Okay, so that would be an equivalent that we could write. And again, whenever we start converting recipes, that's going to be some important information because we're going to want to be able to convert that. Okay, but measuring spoons, wet or dry ingredients. Okay, here's some measuring pitchers. We've got a few of those. You guys have probably seen those in the kitchen. And there's also some, like I mentioned earlier, that are metal that you can't see through. But this is for liquid, for measuring large quantities of liquid. Okay, and you guys have seen this guy before, seen a thermometer, and that we use for measuring temperatures, right? Okay, you guys remember water boiling and water freezing, those temperatures? Okay, so that's what we use when we're calibrating our thermometers, making sure that they are accurate. Okay, all right, I'm gonna stop sharing here. So let's see, we are going to be making some delicious soup, and we're going to be doing some measurement experiments when you guys are back here on your at school days. So you'll have that to be looking forward to. Anybody got any questions or anything they would like to know or talk about before we get off of here?